On today's show, Cooper Flagg outduels Michael Porter Jr. and takes down the Nets in a game that should exemplify to Brooklyn fans how this year's tank could have a big reward down the line. I'll dive into that and more on today's episode of Locked On Nets.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. This show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's episode, I'm going to be recapping Brooklyn's 113-105 loss to the Mavericks down in Dallas. I got Lucas Kaplan joining the show. We're going to talk about Brooklyn's tank strategy, holding out some guys for their second straight back-to-back. Also, Cooper Flagg, what a performance like this should show Nets fans about how a tank can have a big payoff down the line. Also, some of what we saw from Brooklyn's rookies and veterans. We'll get into all that now. Let's go. All right, joining the show now, we got Lucas Kaplan from Nets Daily. And Lucas, we're here today talking about another Nets loss, this time to the Dallas Mavericks. And this was the second night of a back-to-back, and this was another back-to-back where the Nets are seemingly committing more to a tank. And I had two major takeaways from this game. One was about the Nets tanking and, their strategy of holding guys out during back-to-backs. The other was Cooper Flagg. But yes, this is, the Nets have made it a clear strategy during their last back-to-back. Before this, they held out, multiple guys during both of those games against the Rockets and the Wizards. And then in this back-to-back, they sit out MPJ on Sunday along with Drake Powell, and then they sit Yegor Dioman and Cam Thomas tonight. And this comes back to, they had that 7-3 stretch. A lot of fans were saying they should push for the play-in. We obviously knew that they were unlikely to do that, and they come away with two straight losses. And this was a big loss tonight, at least in terms of the draft lottery standings, because the Nets are now 2 games ahead of the Utah Jazz and Charlotte Hornets for 5th, and they're 1.5 games behind the Wizards for 4th. So they've committed, to a tanking agenda, it seems like, and they're using back-to-backs as a vehicle for that. I mean, this is now, I think, 7 losses in 8 games for the Nets. So that's takeaway number 1. And then takeaway number 2 is Cooper Flagg. And he, in this game, in my opinion, showed Nets fans why you tank. And I know that there's going to be a lot of fans who come back at me and say the Mavs, were in the play-in last year, whatever. They jumped up, in the odds. They spiked the number 1 pick, and that's a reason why you don't have to tank. But I don't subscribe to the logic that just because a team with a 1.4% chance spiked the top pick, that you don't have to maximize their odds. So those are my 2 takeaways. Cooper Flagg was unbelievable in this game. The Nets inch closer to getting possibly a player like that in this coming year's draft. What do you got for me with how the Nets operated in this?
Really, really strong couple of days for the boys in the black and white. Tanking, they are also not good. They're not only tanking, they're also, just not a very good basketball team. They record would be a little better if they were going for it, but they only rested guys on this back-to-back that have pretty legitimate injury concerns and aren't playing back-to-backs. I mean, Yegor has looked good and he's looked fine, but, with the plantar fascia injury, they never use that term. He hasn't really been playing back-to-backs. MPJ, Cam with the hamstring, need no explaining. But, man, last couple days, just a couple insights, right? Against the Grizzlies, Memphis is running out a lineup of Jock Landale and Jaren Jackson Jr. in the front court. Nets playing these big lineups all year. You got Danny, you got Noah. They go with Day'Ron, who has to guard Jaren Jackson Jr., and 4 guards. I think, was it Jalen Wilson playing the 4, something like that? Really good stealth tanking move by Jordy. I see you. Much appreciated. Today, listen, Cooper was awesome in the first half. Don't get me wrong, but straight doubling him 40 feet away from the basket, given some of his isolation jump shooting numbers, okay, Jordy, I see you.
Do you think we're finally getting Jordy buying in a little bit to the tanking agenda?
I'm just those two back-to-back days, I'm like, I don't know if he's buying in. And I think some of it is like not so much tanking, but Jordy being like, well, like let's just double and make them run around anyway for the point of our own growth. But
license to experiment with
to experiment.
Yeah, like that's the way that I would put it.
I don't know about all those doubles. And Najee Marshall, you will be remembered.
This was the Nets down the stretch of this game. Like we'll get a little bit more into the specifics. I think we're going more big picture look, but yeah, down the stretch of this game, Cooper Flagg was awesome, but it was the Nets doubling Cooper Flagg, and it was death by Najee Marshall floater, who made it seemed like 15 floaters in the fourth quarter. He just doesn't miss. But yeah, I want to go back to Cooper Flagg because I said, a main takeaway of mine from this game was Cooper Flagg, showing Nets fans who, have come back at me and you, I'm sure, about a lot of Nets fans aren't into the tank, and that's fine. If you don't want to tank, that's a totally respectable and reasonable position to hold. But Cooper Flagg in this game showed Nets fans why you tank for one of these top type prospects, because he was lights out in this game. And obviously, he's a very high-end prospect that you're going to land with the top pick in any draft. But in this game tonight, 27 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, no turnovers, 10 of 17 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3, and 5 of 6 from the free throw line. And he outduels Michael Porter Jr., and he looks like a star-level player in this game at, 18 years old, 19 years old, whatever he is, one of the youngest players in the league. And I just think that, I don't think there's a player in this coming year's draft who's as good as Cooper Flagg, but I've talked to a lot of draft people leading into this season and early this season who have said, you look at some of the guys at the top of the draft, they might not, Cooper Flagg would still be the number 1 pick in this draft in their opinion, but it's not this monumental gulf between Cooper and some of these other guys. So this is why you tank, is to get a player like this in Cooper Flagg, who it's very clear is going to transform this Mavericks franchise and their trajectory for the next probably decade plus. They were down in the dumps. People were picketing and rioting. They spike Cooper Flagg, and look, all that solves everything. So for the Nets fans, I know some Nets fans were really into that 7-3 stretch, and they were saying they should push to the play-in, and I understand that. That's fine if you have that position. But that's why I think this is why Lucas and I say those extra 10 or 12 wins that you really want to go all out for, in our opinion, they're not worth the expense of not maximizing your chances of getting a player like this. And I think tonight was a really good display of how much those players can transform the outlook of a team.
What I also say is there is no evidence to the argument that people will make that losing begets losing, and a losing culture is harmful to the development of young players, right? Nobody thinks Franz Wagner would be a little bit better than he is right now if the Magic, were better his first couple years. Nobody thinks that Amen Thompson, and I know people aren't always super high on him, and Jabari Smith Jr., right? Nobody thinks that they'd be more well-equipped to help a Rockets team in the playoffs if only they had been better in their first couple years in the league. It's not a real argument, I think, in my opinion, right? And there was we were having a conversation in the media room the other day, right, about how I think, and I think you think, this is the time to tank because the alternative is maybe the 11th seed, right? And they don't have their pick next year, so this is their last chance, or really the chance, to add a prized pick in the draft. And somebody, covering another team said, well, you got to be careful about that, right? Because if you tank and you tank and you tank, then it kind of, where does it stop? And the answer is, well, you have to draft good players. If you draft Jan Vesely or Mario Hezonja in the top 5 or 6, then sure, you're probably going to keep on tanking. But as you said, you increase your chances, right, to pick higher and higher. And so I'm happy. I listen, it's tough to root for your team to lose and watch, and I get it, but this is their chance. If you want to talk about trading MPJ and long-term stuff, that's more of a debate. But in terms of this year, the best outcome, a couple big losses this weekend.
Yeah, and you said you can't draft players like that. That's the lesson. Another lesson for the Nets is this is the last year that they're going to be tanking. They don't have their pick next year. So it's not this is going to turn into an eternal tank. Could they be bad next year? Sure, but it's not going to be by design. They're going to be trying to be better next year, and that's for sure. And I also, like you said, this kind of narrative that these losses are poisonous to the young guys. I don't really subscribe to that idea, because you look at them in these last two games and like, sure, we'll see when we get into, March and April, like it can look really ugly in the dog days of the season, like sure. But in these games where they're holding some guys out during back-to-backs, like these were both competitive losses during these last two games. And a lot of the Nets losses this year have been competitive. And also, I'd say if anything, it's getting some of these guys more minutes and more experience, the way that the Nets are approaching this. Because you look at it, they're holding out guys, as kind of their way of tanking. That's what all teams do. But the Nets kind of have a real reason to do it, because they have 5 rookie first-round picks, and they have a lot of other rotation guys. So you look at a game like tonight, they hold out Yegor Diomen, and, Cam Thomas sits out, and Nolan Traore gets a ton more reps. Drake Powell gets a ton more on-ball reps. Other guys get to play. So the idea that, like, it's poisonous, like, to these young guys, I get it. Like, if you're sending a clear signal to them that you're trying to lose, I think that can be, that can kind of seep into the locker room. But I'd also say, like, Jordy is a really good coach. He keeps them competitive in a lot of these games. And if anything, the way they're going about this, it's getting a lot of other guys more reps, which I think is a positive. So, yeah, I don't really subscribe to that. And I think that, you look at it as the season progresses, it's going to be a big storyline leading up to the trade deadline. But I think that this back-to-back, and the last back-to-back, and the way that the Nets have handled this since that 7-3 stretch, it's kind of been an indication that they are leaning into the tank. And some of these other teams are starting to win. Like we talked about it right before we came on here. Like the Pacers have won 3 straight. The Wizards obviously have been hot lately. I mean, Lucas, you have the numbers. What are the Nets? You said they're 2 wins out of the top record, the worst record in the league right now.
They have 11 wins, and the worst team in the league. Well, the 3 worst teams in the league, New Orleans, Sacramento, and Indiana, all have 9 wins. The Pacers are on a 9-game winning streak. Actually, tonight might have been the Indiana Pacers' their 9th win. The Kings are up 15 on the Lakers when we started to record this. So they're really right there. And then the Pelicans don't have their own pick. I think they're going to look pretty much how they do now in March and April, and the Nets won't, and these teams trying to tank won't. So, hey, man, like, it's, the pro tankers may have been a bit of doom and gloom, right, in December, but, like, long way to go. They're right in the thick of things. And I just have a question. Do you think that starting Ben Surratt for the first 5 games of the season, do you think that was a proactive tanking move, or was Brooklyn's defense so bad at the beginning of the season that in training camp, Ben was dicing them up, and the coaching staff was like, oh my God, like, we got to Ben, like, he's killing these guys?
I lean towards the latter. I think that might have been the case, because I don't know, all we heard in training camp from the players, and like these were self-admissions, like we did not ask about it, and they were like, Ben is killing it. And like I could see that during training camp, and also like Yegor was hurt. Ben clearly looked better than Nolan during the preseason. So I think that's how it played out. But yeah, as you said, like the Nets are right there. If they, I know some fans don't want to hear this, but if they go about this tank the right way for the rest of the season, they have a good chance where they can at least stay in this top 5, maybe get up into that top 4 and that top 3. And that's going to be huge, because if you've been watching college basketball, Darren Peterson looks like a stud. Cam Boozer is showing out. I know Cam Boozer is Lucas's guy. We'll have a lot of episodes about this down the line. Darren Peterson, when he does play, there's some comparisons of guys that he looks like that I think would sound a little, sacrilegious or whatever you say. But those guys look really good. The Nets are right there right now, and it seems like they're trending in a good direction. And we'll see what they do with Michael Porter Jr. They could trade him. They could also keep him and try to just keep going about the tank with that. And if they can spike a top pick and they keep MPJ, maybe they're cooking. So we'll talk about all that as the season progresses. But I do want to get into some of the performances that we saw during this game. I want to talk about the rookies, namely Nolan Traore and Drake Powell. And then we'll also get into some stuff about Day'Ron Sharpe, who really, dominated early in this game. And Noah Clowney has struggled a little bit as of late. So we'll get into all those guys when we continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, during basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building, the energy, the crowd, that first big run that gets everyone on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. That's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets, fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Guys, browsing the Game Time app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. Seeing the view from your seat before buying makes choosing tickets easy and confident, and prices include fees up front, so the total is clear from the start. Whether it's an NBA game or another live event, everything is right there in one place. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today and get in on the action. Guys, it's 2025, almost 2026, and those days of waiting for something to become a full-blown emergency before you see a doctor, they're over. No more walking it off for 6 months. No more pretending that weird shoulder stiffness is just sleeping wrong. It's time to take your health seriously, and ZocDoc makes that easier than ever, because staying healthy is more than hitting the gym or eating right. It's about actually getting things checked out when something feels off. Using ZocDoc makes scheduling easier. Search for in-network doctors and book right in the app. Real appointment times are listed, including same-day visits. No more back-and-forth phone calls or waiting to be seen. It's super helpful for routine checkups and those little issues you've been meaning to get checked out. So stop putting off your doctor's appointments and get the care you need. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA. Again, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, recapping Brooklyn's loss to the Dallas Mavericks. And I want to talk about the rookies, because there's two guys with Yegor Diomin and Cam Thomas sitting out in this one. Two of the Nets rookie guards got a lot more run in this game, and that was Nolan Traore and Drake Powell. Nolan still came off the bench. A little bit of a curious decision. Jordy went with Drake Powell starting alongside Terrence Mann. I think Nolan and Drake ended up playing around the same amount. They closed with Drake. But Nolan, I really liked some of the things that I saw from him in this game, and some of the things that I also saw against Memphis. And as of late, Nolan in this one, he only finishes with 6 points, 6 assists, 3 turnovers on 3 of 9 from the field and 0 of 4 from 3. But the way that Nolan's processing the floor in these last couple games, I was really encouraged. I mean, tonight he only had 6 assists, 3 turnovers. He easily could have had like 10 or 11 assists, because a lot of guys missed some really good looks. Like there were a few alley-oops that he couldn't connect on with Day'Ron Sharpe, but they were right there. A lot of threes were missed. And I just think that he sees the floor really well. Like I talked about it last game, he has really good vision on like these cross-court skip passes, whether from the top of the key or whether on like live dribble reads. He had a couple where he drove downhill tonight, and he hits like these skip passes over a lot of defenders. And he has that vision to see that pass like two defenders away amidst all the trees. And I think part of that is due to the size and the length that he has. But I just like the way that he's playing. Like the three-point shooting, that's a struggle. We'll talk about that. But what are you seeing from Nolan? I just think he's seeing the game a lot better. It seems like it's slowing down for him right now.
Yeah. He's putting that, defender in jail a lot of the time. The Mavericks in the second half realized that they can just go under screens, which is always going to be the thing. For a while,
aggressively under screens, like 5 feet of space.
I thought Jordy was going to bench him he took one. He took a pull-up 3 and he missed, like not really a close miss. And someone was walking to the table and I was like, wow, like already, but it was MPJ for someone else. I was on a pod with Chuck and Darts. Chuck, who's a great NBA draft guy a while ago, and we were kind of being a little negative about Nolan after a month or so. And he said, if he had one NBA skill, like, what is it? Like, because it's, what is it? And I said, well, if there is anything, and I wasn't sure at the time, it is like court mapping and diagramming out of pick and roll, because, again, he handled the ball so much as a pre-NBA player, and you can see it, right? Like, it's not necessarily like premeditated reads, but this is a compliment. Like, he knows where help is going to come from, right? He knows, corners are filled. Like, he just has a good sense of how pick and roll spacing works, because he played a lot of that style in France. And you're seeing his best moments, I think, come in that. The thing that was great today, 3 of 5 from 2, right? Like, he does not have an area of the court where he can score from, like, at all so far. And, maybe part of that is he He's a flyweight, right? He weighs like 150 pounds. His metrics are going to look really, really bad because he's shooting like 30% from the floor. But, if you believe that more time and increased weight will help the scoring, like at least he looks, pretty confident and secure as almost something like a system QB, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and 3 of those, you said 3 of 5 from 2. 2 of those 3 makes were floaters where he was working against, in the pick and roll. He kind of put that guy in jail, as you said, and he had the defender in drop coverage, and that defender kind of shaded towards the roll man, and he stopped and hit the floater. And that's really big, I think, for Nolan. Capper was getting all fired up about that on the broadcast because, like we've said it with Nolan, like his biggest skill is his ability to, touch the paint and be like this blazing fast guy downhill, whether in the pick and roll, turning the corner, or just blowing past guys. But he's had a tendency to try to just go full tilt at that, big man under the rim, who's the rim protector. And, we've spoken a lot about Jordi Fernandez said earlier in the season, that's something that you got to learn not to do all the time, because challenging the best rim protectors in the world is not the most efficient way to go about, offense, especially when you're a 6'4", below the rim player like Nolan. So we're kind of seeing that adjustment of him going from just going full tilt downhill. And we said we wanted to see a little bit more of the in-between game in the craft. And we're starting to see him like put some guys in jail, take the floaters, slow down, and make that live dribble read, whether for a dump off, a lob, a skip pass. I just think that kind of speaks to the game slowing down for him. Now, the 3-point shooting is a concern. Like Nolan was shooting really hot. He had like a 9-game stretch in the G League where he was shooting like 51% from 3.
Yeah.
And now he's 5 of 27 from 3 over his last 7 NBA games. He's taken them with confidence. They're just not going in. I don't think like the misses look terrible, but that's going to be a conversation for him moving forward, as it is for all of the Nets rookies. And I mean, like none of the Nets rookies outside of Yegor Diomin are shooting well from 3. Like Danny Wolf started really hot. He's cooled off. Drake Powell, we'll get into him for a second. But like this was the narrative surrounding the Nets rookie class. And the reason that they got killed by a lot of people is like Yegor Diomin was lumped into this also. You drafted all these guys with overlapping skill sets and none of them can shoot. Yegor, sigh of relief for the Nets. Looks like he's a really high-level shooter. The other guys, nobody's really shooting well from 3 right now, or they've at least been shooting.
Wolf is 5 of 10 in the last 2 games, but but anecdotally, like it does feel like if he has to shoot off any sort of movement, like if it's not like a wide open catch and shoot 3, just it does not feel like it's going in. But we'll see with Wolf. The 3-point shooting, like for a lot of these guys, it's kind of similar. Like if they're off the dribble, if they're like fading or coming, moving a certain direction, it does not look good. And, it's early. We'll have time on that. But, Nolan's going to see so much drop coverage, right? He's going to like that area of the court, that in-between area. If he can, make those floaters, and he's making them at a good rate this year. I forget the number between this and the G League, but he's somewhere across both leagues, like 45-ish% on from floater range, which is really promising. But, it'll really just be about him, what he looks like with more weight, because I think if you're like a Nolan optimist, then you can say, well, he's almost just like at this outlier disadvantage because of his small frame, that will change. And then, that'll precipitate a big leap. I don't know if I'm there yet. I've had concerns that I've talked about in a bunch of places, but he's doing, like, the fact that he's surviving and looks kind of halfway competent on an NBA court in January of his rookie year is honestly not something I anticipated, like even 2-3 months ago,
Yeah, and I think a positive side, and you said like for all these rookies, like if they have to shoot off the dribble or sidestep or like come off a screen and are fading, like the 3-point shot looks ugly. And then you have Michael Porter Jr., who I just feel obligated to mention because then you have him who's just hitting like continues to hit the most ridiculous shots. And like, we're not even going to talk about him at length because we've talked about him on seemingly every episode. But tonight, he had like 28 or 29 points, 9 of 17 from the field. I think he was at like 3 assists and 6 turnovers. So he was sloppy, but he puts up like 28 points on above 50% shooting like every night. It seems like it's just what he does. He's just that level of shot maker. I don't even want to spend any time on him. I want to go to Drake Powell because we don't have unlimited time here. But Drake, I thought, looked decent in this game. He had 10 points, 5 of 10 from the field, 0 of 4 from 3. They closed with him. Drake is just interesting because he's just like, you don't really like, I think you've said this about him before. I don't really know how his offensive game is going to scale up, but he shot like decently from three, and he kind of has these secondary skills. Like they'll run him off these zoom actions, or they'll give him the occasional pick and roll rep, and he like probes to the mid-range jumper that he seemingly like always hits. Like he hit a few of them today, and I checked during the game. He's shooting like after this game, he's shooting like 50% on jumpers this year, and like really well from the mid-range. So he's just a weird player right now. Like I don't really know what to make of him, but he does have some of these like secondary skills that we just didn't know. But I don't know if there's like any one thing offensively that he's really good at right now outside of like transition play finishing, which he never does because the Nets are never out in transition.
First of all, I on cleaning the glass, they ran on 10% of their possessions, cleaning the glass tracked. So like 1 in every 10 possessions today started with a transition play, started on the fast break. It's like a 5th percentile number. They just never run. And I was going to bring this up with Nolan. It's tough when you have all these 19-year-olds and they're fast like Nolan, or they're athletic, or they see the floor, the open floor like Yegor, and you just never run. Some of that in the early season was about not getting stops, but I think when ultimately they begin to play faster, like they'll have more of these moments, and it can be frustrating watching for the rookies to pop and there's just never a transition opportunity. Like I remember a couple weeks ago, there was a game where like Nolan got a steal and brought it up court and then hit Drake, who hit Wolf, who finished. And it was like, oh my God, all three of them on the break. But yeah, Drake, listen, the fact that he got up 10 shots today is big. It's a much more positive indicator than like the normal kind of corner sitting, not involved in the offense at all thing that sometimes happens with him.
And this is also, sorry to interrupt you, but this is also like Yegor's out, but Cam Thomas is out too. Like, Drake had some opportunity tonight and he actually got to do some stuff.
And they're running him off like the actions they would run for Cam. It's nice to see. Stop the count. He's at 60% on twos this year. It's like, it's 67 total attempts. It's like such low volume. But if that somehow maintains and we can sit here at the end and say that this 6'5", right? What is that what they list? 6'5", 6'6"? Mm-hmm. That this 6'5", 19-year-old shot 60% on twos this year. I think the floaters and mid-range shots might regress a little, but that is like one hell of a positive indicator so far that you can put a little bit of stock in, I think, and use to get yourself excited about Drake.
Yeah, there we go. That's what we got on the rookies. Do also want to talk about Day'Ron Sharpe, who just comes in and just makes a massive impact off the bench in seemingly every game. Also want to talk about Noah Clowney. He's been struggling a little bit as of late, so we'll get into both of those guys when we close out Locked On Nets after a quick break.
I carry a lot of responsibility in my household. If something happened to me, there would be serious consequences. We have a mortgage. We got tuition. We got everyday bills. Those aren't going anywhere if something happens to me. And I know that's an overwhelming feeling, but I'm taking steps to protect my family by getting life insurance through Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast, easy, and 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. And as of March 2025, Business Insider named Ethos the #1 no medical exam instant life insurance provider. Ethos has 4.8 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot with over 3,000 reviews. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNBA. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get your free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNBA. That's ethos.com/LockedOnNBA. Ethos.com/LockedOnNBA. Application times and rates may vary.
All right, coming back from the break with Lucas Kaplan, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode. Just touched on the rookies. Want to touch on Day'Ron Sharpe, who came in off the bench in this one. We just did an episode about Day'Ron Sharpe last week. He's been playing very well as of late and kind of nipping at Nick Claxton's heels. And he comes in this game and he makes an immediate impact. He finishes with 14 points and 12 rebounds on 4 of 7 shooting. He was a +2 in 22 minutes. I think him and Terrence Mann were the only Nets who had positive plus minuses in this one. But Day'Ron came in and he had a double-double. He had 10 and 10 in his first 10 minutes played. and it was the fastest double-double of any NBA player this season. So it's just another game where like Day'Ron comes in and he makes an immediate impact with his offensive rebounding, with his hustle, with some of the things that he's doing around the rim finishing. Like, he's just an impact player. Nick Claxton, I don't think he had a bad game today. He is playing against starters. Day'Ron's playing against second units a lot, but Day'Ron is just the kind of like steady drumbeat for Day'Ron continues. I don't think he's going to take the starting job or anything, but he just continues to look really impactful.
It's just every game he's like +4 in an 8-point loss. Today he's +2 in an 8-point loss, or he's -4 in a 20-point loss. Like, and it's 3 years of this now, right? It's the third season. I just think that like the rebounding impact and the way he plays provides such a high floor where you're night in, night out, like you do know what you're going to get. And it is against backups, and that must be said, but like, he has the games where he starts and it's the same stuff in 25 or 30 minutes. Last year, he had one of the best games any individual net played in that like 25 and 20 game against OKC with Hartenstein and Chet, on the other side of the court. And tonight, it's just the same thing, man. You can't fake rebounding impact over this big of a sample. And that conversation we had the other day about their long-term plans at center, like, I'm starting to get pretty cemented on that position, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go so far as cemented, but I think it was clear. If you guys haven't checked that episode out, go check it out. It was about the Nets center dilemma between Day'Ron Sharpe and Nick Claxton. And I think that, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation, definitely leading up to the trade deadline. How do they handle Nick Claxton? Because obviously MPJ and Nick Claxton are seen as like the Nets' biggest assets, veteran assets. And that's going to be a big conversation because they're going to have a decision to make on these two centers, as we outlined in that episode. Last thing I want to talk about is Noah Clowney, who, had that really hot stretch, kind of earlier in the season after like when he came into the starting lineup. And since then, he has, kind of regressed and has struggled offensively. He still looks confident. I think he's still making an impact on some nights. I mean, tonight he had 13 points. 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 of 9 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3. The 3-point shooting has really regressed. I just pulled up the stats, and over Noah's last 12 games, he's shooting 33.3% from the field and 23.9% from 3. The volume's still really high, but we've had some regression. I think he's still been decent on 2s, but the 3-point shooting, it's kind of throughout his whole career, it's kind of been a roller coaster. It's been like up and down. He's a very streaky shooter.
I mean, it's so like he's just a really interesting player, and this is another factor to consider. And he's only, I don't even think he's played 100 career games yet. If he has, it's like right around there. And he's just 21, and it's his first year of being like physically developed, honestly, for the league. So I'm not saying this to be like you should be out on him or anything like that, but he's had about 550 attempts from 3 for his career. He's a little under 33%. At some point, this, wing player with a super high 3-point rate that makes 33% of his threes is not like the most valuable archetype. It's just not, there's just such a ceiling, right, on what his value as a player can be. And I don't think he's doing anything wrong. He's taking the shots that they want him to take. His block and steal rate, especially like in help, we see him protect the rim, as a secondary guy. That's been way up, over the last 2 months. And so there are some nights where he plays well, despite not hitting threes. Like he gets to the line, he finishes, he protects the rim. But if you're just going to pencil him in as a low 30s 3-point shooter, I don't know. The conversation around him gets a little bit more interesting and like confusing as to what his long-term projection is. So I think now that like just the career-long shooting sample is starting to cement itself, it's another layer of the Noah conversation.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say cement itself. Like, I think it's still pretty early. I mean, it's 105 games or 106 games, but yeah, like it's a decent sized sample. But he's down now this season to 32% from 3 on 6.8 attempts per game, and 12 attempts per 100 possessions. So it's high volume, but like we do hear it, like Jordi Fernandez, Steve Hetzel, whatever guys we've talked to, whenever they talk about Noah, like they say he's a very good 3-point shooter. So clearly like they see some stuff in practice from him. I do think like the 2-point development and the way that he's been able to drive and be physical as a driver, that is a really big development because he's not just reliant on the 3-point shot, but he is, even though he's like been better when he gets in the lane, creating space and discarding and finishing and having that rip up move and drawing fouls, he's not like a twitchy or high level ball handler whatsoever. So his ability to get downhill and generate advantages is going to be reliant on the 3-point shot. And if people start just sagging off and saying, we're going to let you shoot, that's where it can get a little dicey.
Hey, if you watch these games, teams are starting to short close on him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like teams aren't going for those pump fakes. It's getting harder for him to get in the lane. And I think teams are kind of starting to be like, well, we're not sure he can actually shoot enough to warrant like these hair on fire closeouts, because we don't want him drawing fouls in the lane. So that's like a sneaky, I think, development thing to watch is teams are starting to like short close out on him. And that's going to be a big, a pivotal kind of obstacle for him to overcome. And one of the ways to do that is just making shots. But again, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that big development, but that's all we got for you tonight. Lucas, appreciate you taking the time. The Nets are going to be back in action on Wednesday against the Pelicans. And then on Friday, they come back to Barclays Center, so we'll have you back on, but appreciate you taking the time as always. That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. If you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy the content, take a second right now, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you could do to engage is much appreciated. We got a lot of trade speculation surrounding the Nets right now. We got them back in action on Wednesday against the Pelicans. So I have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.